Good afternoon, Steelers Nation. I hope each and every one of you is having a fantastic Thursday, filled with good health, peace, success, and plenty of great news. As we move deeper into the preseason, the excitement surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers keeps reaching another level, and today we have some important updates that every member of the Black and Gold family needs to hear. Before we get started, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're not already part of our Steelers community, and turn on notifications so you never miss any breaking news, roster updates, exclusive reports, or everything happening in Pittsburgh. Now, without wasting another second, let's jump right into the biggest headlines and the most important Pittsburgh Steelers news of the day. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. The first unofficial depth chart of the 2026 season is finally here, and while it gives us our first official look at how the Steelers are lining up before preseason football begins, there is one important detail that every fan needs to keep in mind before overreacting to anything on this list. Several positions on this depth chart simply do not match what has actually been happening every day at training camp. Some defensive linemen are listed at positions they haven't been practicing, while others who have consistently worked at certain spots are listed somewhere completely different. That immediately raises questions about how much of this chart actually reflects Mike McCarthy's evaluations and how much may simply be an administrative listing rather than the coaching staff's true intentions. Even with that disclaimer, there are still some fascinating storylines that jump off the page, and perhaps none is more important than what we saw at running back. Jaylen Warren is officially listed as the Steelers' RB1 ahead of Rico Dowell, and honestly, that should not surprise anyone who has been paying attention throughout camp. Warren has already shown that he can handle early down responsibilities, but what really separates him is his versatility. He's expected to continue taking a significant share of third down work while still carrying enough early down opportunities to remain the lead back. Meanwhile, Rico Dowell appears positioned to complement him rather than replace him, giving Pittsburgh what could become a very balanced backfield rotation entering the regular season. Another interesting detail is Kaleb Johnson's placement as RB3. That might not seem like a huge headline today, but it could become one very quickly once preseason games begin. With Warren and Dowell being two players, the Steelers will likely want to protect from unnecessary preseason wear and tear. Johnson should receive plenty of carries over the next several weeks. This is exactly the type of opportunity young running backs dream about. Every snap becomes a chance to prove they belong, and if Johnson takes advantage of those opportunities, his role could grow much faster than expected. On the other hand, if he struggles, the competition behind him is not going away. Speaking of competition, one of the clearest battles continues to be at right guard. Spencer Anderson remains listed as the starter, which lines up with what has consistently been happening during training camp. He's taken the majority of first-team reps, putting himself in position to open the season as Pittsburgh's starting right guard, but this competition is far from over. Brock Hoffman continues pushing for that job and has reportedly put together an impressive stretch of practices since the pads came on. The coaching staff now has exactly what it wants: legitimate competition that forces both players to earn every snap, rather than simply being handed the position. The same can be said at right tackle. Dylan Cook is currently listed as the starter, and there are solid reasons why. He finished last season playing well, has experience on both sides of the offensive line, and provides a reliable floor for the offense, but that doesn't mean his job is guaranteed. Max Starks. Actually, the depth chart discussion centers on rookie Max Ainier emerging during camp as someone who has impressed early, creating pressure on Cook to continue proving he deserves the starting role. Training camp and preseason performances will ultimately determine who wins this battle, and that's exactly what makes this competition worth watching over the next few weeks. Then we move to perhaps one of the biggest surprises on the entire depth chart. Way Black is listed as the Steelers' starting nose tackle ahead of veteran Sebastian Joseph Day. On paper, that looks like a major development, but when you compare it to what has actually happened during practices, things become much more complicated. Sebastian Joseph Day and other defensive linemen have spent much of camp lining up at defensive tackle or defensive end rather than nose tackle. Even more confusing, Gabriel Rubio, who has reportedly worked almost exclusively at nose tackle, isn't listed there at all. Instead, he's classified as a defensive end. Those inconsistencies make it difficult to know whether this reflects actual coaching decisions or simply position labels that don't accurately represent how Pittsburgh plans to use these players once games begin. One defensive role that does appear much clearer involves Jalen Ramsey. The depth chart lists him as the starting nickel defender, confirming exactly what many observers have expected expected throughout the offseason. Instead of playing deep safety, Ramsey appears destined to operate much closer to the line of scrimmage, where his size, physicality, tackling ability, and blitzing skills can have maximum impact. The coaching staff clearly envisions him filling a versatile role capable of affecting both the running game and passing game, potentially becoming one of Patrick Graham's most valuable defensive chess pieces this season. Special teams also reveal an interesting direction. Caden Legion is listed as both the primary punt returner and one of the starting kick returners alongside Jaylen Warren. Considering Legion's outstanding production as a return specialist in college, this shouldn't come as a surprise. His ability to flip field position and create explosive plays gives Pittsburgh another weapon that extends well beyond his role at wide receiver. It also suggests the coaching staff already has significant confidence in his ability to contribute immediately. Looking at everything together, this first depth chart gives us valuable clues, but it also reminds us not to treat every listing as final. Several position assignments don't fully match what has been taking place during training camp, and the preseason will almost certainly reshape portions of this chart before week 1 arrives. Still, battles at running back, right guard, right tackle, along the defensive front and in the secondary are already becoming much clearer, setting up what could be an extremely competitive few weeks as players fight to secure their roles before the regular season officially begins. Now, I want to hear from you. Which position battle or depth chart decision surprised you the most? And do you think this unofficial depth chart reflects what we'll actually see when the Steelers take the field for week 1? But the depth chart didn't stop producing surprises there. One of the more intriguing details came along the defensive front with Keeanu Benton. Instead of being listed as a nose tackle, Benton appeared as the second team defensive tackle behind Cam Heyward. That's noteworthy because throughout training camp, he has spent plenty of time lining up at nose tackle. This creates another example of the depth chart not perfectly matching what has actually been happening on the practice field. Still, if this eventually reflects a real adjustment in his role, it could be a positive development. The belief behind that idea is simple. Benton has looked more comfortable attacking gaps and getting into the backfield rather than consistently taking on double teams at the line of scrimmage. If Pittsburgh allows him to play a more aggressive style, it could maximize his strengths and potentially improve the overall effectiveness of the defensive front. As we talked about earlier, Kaleb Johnson sits as the third running back on the depth chart, and that makes him one of the most fascinating players to watch during the preseason. With Jaylen Warren and Rico Dowell expected to handle the biggest roles once the regular season begins, there is every reason to believe the coaching staff will give Johnson extensive playing time over the next few weeks. Every carry will be another opportunity to prove he deserves a larger role. Preseason football often creates unexpected roster stories, and Johnson now has the platform to become one of them if he consistently produces when the lights come on. Another name that quietly stood out was Lew Nichols. He was listed as RB4 ahead of both Travis Homer and Eli Heidenreich, and that's something very few people probably expected heading into camp. Nichols spent last season on the practice squad after making a strong impression during the previous preseason, but ultimately falling short of making the initial 53-man roster. Now he's back, and according to the depth chart, he's ahead of 2 players many believed had stronger chances to make the team. Even more interesting, Nichols has recently received opportunities with the first-team offense during practices, suggesting that he has caught the coaching staff's attention. Whether that translates into a roster spot remains to be seen, but he's certainly becoming a player worth following closely throughout the remainder of the preseason. The linebacker room also presented a development that deserves attention. Carson Bruner is listed ahead of Malik Harrison, something that certainly raises eyebrows considering Harrison was part of the linebacker rotation last season, while Bruner's rookie year was spent primarily contributing on special teams. The current depth chart places Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson with the first unit, while Cole Holcomb and Carson Bruner occupy the second group. Harrison, meanwhile, finds himself on the third team. That isn't necessarily the final word on the competition, but it does indicate that Bruner has positioned himself well enough to move ahead in the pecking order, at least for now. That situation becomes even more significant when you consider how Pittsburgh may choose to build its final roster. If the Steelers intend to use more dime packages this season, relying on defensive backs to fill hybrid roles closer to the line of scrimmage, they may simply decide they don't need to carry as many inside linebackers. Instead of keeping 5 or even 6 players at that position, 4 could be enough. If that's the direction the coaching staff ultimately takes, then every rep over the next few weeks becomes critical, especially for someone like Malik Harrison, whose roster spot suddenly may not be as secure as many initially believed. The safety room also delivered a couple of noteworthy takeaways. Sebastian Castro, a player many fans have been excited about, currently sits much lower on the depth chart than some expected. He's listed behind Jack Henderson and is working with the third-team unit alongside Devin Boykin. Meanwhile, the starters remain Deshaun Elliott and Jaquan Brisker, while Robert Spears-Jennings continues to receive opportunities with the second-team defense. Based on those current alignments, Spears-Jennings appears to have a much stronger path toward making the roster, particularly because of the value he brings on special teams. Castro, meanwhile, may have to fight for a practice squad opportunity unless he changes the narrative during preseason games. The final major takeaway involves Raheem Jenkins. At first glance, seeing him all the way at the bottom of the safety depth chart certainly stands out. He's currently listed as the 7th safety, but there's an important detail behind that placement. Despite where he appears on paper, Jenkins has